So welcome to What Moves Her by Coldwell Banker Advantage, our localized program that unapologetically shines the light on women's leadership in real estate and helps you reach your goals. I am Elsa Woods, Marketing Brand Manager at CBA, and our guest today is Molly McKinley, Integrated Marketing Specialist, founder and managing partner of Red Tail Creative, and the author of the book, The Intentional Business, which you all will get to take home a copy of today, courtesy of CBA President Rick Gregory. So Rick personally purchased these as a gift for all of you guys for coming here today. So thank you, Rick. Molly's special expertise in real estate marketing and branding, combined with her passion for a different type of business culture, has formed the perfectly blended philosophy of creating a business by intention. Molly, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
So one of the most important takeaways, I think, of your book is the idea that there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge within us. But because of the chatter in our minds, the day-to-day operations of our businesses, it's kind of hard to access that. One of my favorite tools to kind of quiet down my mind and access my inner wisdom has always been the breath. I think it's a gateway to get to that knowledge that lies within. So would you mind sort of walking us through a short breathing exercise so that we can come present into this moment and take away the most of this event tonight?
Absolutely. So first of all, just to set some context, it might feel weird, and that's okay. Just lean into the weirdness. I'm also a 500-hour yoga teacher, so I'm qualified to teach you. So doesn't have to be. So just the most important thing is just get comfortable in your body. If your feet are able just to ground them solidly on the floor. Actually, I'm going to stand, kind of get into my body. So feet are grounded on the floor, sort of the shoulders start to melt away from the ears, pulling that belly in, just sort of get comfortable in your body, starting to feel the seat, your sitting bones in your seat. Let's take our right hand on our heart, our left hand on our belly, and just close our eyes here. Just start to feel that breath wave, feeling the air entering the nose and feel the air leaving the nose. I am breathing in. I am breathing out, and just hold here for a moment with that mantra, connecting to the breath. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. Now let's connect, unite our breath together as a group, breathing as one, breathing in together. Exhaling completely through the mouth, releasing and letting go. Big collective breath in together. Big collective exhale through the mouth, releasing and letting go. Last uniting breath, breathing in. Big exhale, releasing through the mouth. Slowly releasing eyes and letting go. And did you feel the shift when we closed our eyes? The room sort of softened. Maybe that anxious weirdness sort of like kind of felt into your body. So it's just so cool how that breath is that uniting. Yoga is, the meaning of yoga is to yoke, to unite breath, body, mind, which actually happens to be the actual definition of happiness. So there you go.
I love that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The other thing I want to point out is there is a shift, right? I'm sure you can all feel that. And it's something that you created in just a few seconds. You have access to that, so just remember that. So Molly, you and I first connected about 6 months ago, almost 6 months ago, and I was reaching out to marketing experts trying to figure out how I was going to combine my passion for mindfulness to marketing. And I remember coming across your website and thinking, oh my gosh, someone's doing it. Someone's combined business and mindfulness. So when I think of an intentional business, I sort of think of the different components of a business, which is the brand, the messaging, the people in the business, the owners, the staff, and then the people through it, so our customers and clients. And I think that it's easy through the operations of the day-to-day to forget how all of those things are interconnected. But when we kind of zoom out and look at the business as a whole, as one entity, we can kind of fall back into that place where we can remember what the original intention was of creating that business in the first place. So I wanted to ask you first what intention is, what is your definition of an intentional business, and why it's important for us to even go there.
Okay, I love this question. So So for me, the idea or the definition of intention is to do something with purpose on purpose, right? So the actual definition of Webster's is like to aim for a goal, the aim, the goal, or the purpose. So like Simon Sinek says, like the big why. Like, why are you doing that? That is the intention. Intention is fueled by emotion, right? So when we're building businesses, we can have something that we're aiming for, but the power behind a purposeful or intentional business is actually the emotion, the heart. So when I think about building an intentional business, it always comes down to that first step. Why were you inspired in spirit from the very beginning to create this thing, to walk this path? What was that thing, that moment? And that root often is the thing that you need to write on the mirror, hold close to your chest, because it's often the thing that gets lost when things aren't working. So building an intentional business for me is really about alignment. So businesses tend to fail when there's friction. Businesses tend to fail when you're fracturing your energy. So the analogy that I like to use on this is, starting a business, creating a successful business is like, one of the hardest things you have to do. Going from 0 to 1 in a business is like lifting a huge rock up the mountain, right? You need all of your energy, all of your everything to be able to get it up there, right? So imagine like we're all light bulbs, right? So most businesses just are like light bulbs. You kind of just diffuse your light. But to be an intentional business, you become a laser. And when you focus all of your energies together, you have the power then to start to break through the walls and the barriers and the obstacles that businesses face. So again, like for a business like this, like a bunch of light bulbs, you can create light, but when you're focused and aligned, you're a laser. And that is to me the difference of being an intentional business versus just a regular business. And I also, because I worked with so many startups, I can tell pretty easily now which businesses are going to make it or not based on the leadership's ability to unite the light bulbs. And so it's super important with your teams and your partners, like, are we diffusing our energy? Are we fracturing our energy, and where? And how can we pull it together and have a singular mission, unite the mission, so that we can actually use our energy together instead of fracturing? Hopefully that makes some sense.
So I think we hear a lot of, we got to define our why, and this kind of takes it a little bit further, right? It goes a layer underneath that a little bit more.
It is, and intentional business is everything. When I talk about alignment, I'm talking about your human capital. I'm talking about your branding, your marketing, the messaging. Words are important. I'm talking about your brand identity, your colors, the way that you choose, the shapes that you represent. Everything is psychological. Everything has power, potency behind it. And a lot of times we're just sort of skimming the surface of things, and sort of unconsciously choosing, right? But when you move into that layer of intention and you move into that layer of conscious choice, you're actually reclaiming your power. So, and what I mean by that is when most people are, like I said, just tend to just sort of be reacting, oh, that looks nice, that looks nice, that looks nice. And then the self-study or the reflection of, why did I choose that? And is this color really representational of what I'm trying to say? Or is it exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to say? And there's really rich, deep color psychology, color theory. All of these things exist. We just have to kind of touch and go a little bit deeper to make sure, or reality check, that what we're saying is aligned with what we want to say, if that makes some sense.
So let's talk a little bit more about the pillars of an intentional marketing plan. And the first one is messaging. Yeah. So a consistent messaging is obviously important. You want to build that trust. Yeah. What are some ways that an agent can do that to build that consistency?
Yeah, so messaging is, I think, the single most important marketing exercise that you should go through, and it's often the thing that nobody does. And when I say messaging, it's the who are you, what do you care about, what is your value proposition, how does this differentiate you to everybody else, what do your people care about, what drives their behaviors, where is the synergies between those two? And then how do you combine that to the world? So messaging for me, an intentional messaging practice is going through each of those steps. Now, there is a book called The 4 Agreements, and one of the agreements is to be impeccable with your word. And why? Because word is sound vibration, right? And when you think about how we create, how we manifest in this world, quantum theory is now proving this, quantum physics, that everything is a vibration. And so your words are a vibration. And so the words that you put out into the world are very, very critical in terms of what you're creating and what you're attracting. And so understanding that potency is like, for the real estate agents out there, like, don't do something that you think you should or someone else is doing. Like, do those words matter to you? Do those words matter to your customer? Are these true? You know, is this really what I want to say? You know, when it comes to messaging, I always go through a practice of 30, 60, 90, 120 words. Distill that message into those 30, 60, 90, 120 words, and then you repeat it over and over and over. You copy and you paste it. And why do you do that? You do it because that consistency, this world is messy and it is chaotic and it is noisy. And if you aren't saying the exact same thing about who you are and sending that out to the universe, nobody is going to be able to pick up on that. You've got to be so clear. Again, laser beam, let people know exactly who you are, and so that they can find you. It's magnetism. It's the law of, that's just how the world works, right? We magnetize things to us. So it's really, really important that branding, you do the work of understanding who you are, why you're different, why people should care, living up to that truth, and then how that lines with your people, who they are, what they care about, and then that intersection of what you're offering and what they're offering. And that is that messaging magic that actually drives people to you. So,
moving on to the branding aspect, so the colors, I love your interpretation of the vibrations of the different colors and how you can sort of push that message out even further with that. But to me, also, brand is about how somebody how somebody feels when they come across your brand, and the tone of the tone of that messaging. And you can't fake that. That's not something you can fake. As a marketer, I can tell you it's nearly impossible. It's never going to work. So to find that authenticity and create that high vibration will just bring in the right people to you. So that's really cool.
Well, and just to add on to this, because it really is an important thing, like the symbols of shape. There are like archetypal forms and symbology that's older than time. So understanding a general sense, or at least understanding and self-reflecting on what you're putting out in the universe, and like, what is the meaning of a circle? Like, why do I have this square? What kind of energy is behind a square? Like, why does that matter? Because these are those things when in a crazy world, when people have seconds to decide yes or no, or, oh, this is interesting or not interesting. Those are the things that subconsciously actually are triggering. And they're triggering that human archetype within each of us. We're going to talk a little bit about archetypes, but the idea of symbols and shapes and colors and making sure those are the things that are aligned as part of your brand identity, right? There's a beautiful, beautiful book, one of my all-time favorite authors that everybody should read. His name is Douglas Rushkoff, and he wrote Team Human, Life Incorporated, and he tells a really beautiful story about branding and its potency. So back in the day, when we would go and buy oats, we would be able to go directly to the miller. And so that miller, we'd have an interaction, we'd have a relationship with that person, and we'd get to know them. So if we got a batch of bad oats, we'd go back and we'd say, hey, you know what, heads up, this was not great. And he's like, oh, I'll make it right, you had a person. So the brand's purpose today is to fill that void of the human. This is where you all have a mass advantage over other brands. It's because, yes, you're part of the Caldwell Banker family, but you're also the brand of yourself. You are still that human that most companies have a void. And that is a huge advantage of working with your brokerage of trust that provides that credibility that this business is going to be accountable, but also the human side of it, which is you. And to really leverage both of those, but it's kind of a cool play.
One of my biggest pet peeves is to not see consistent font.
Oh, yes.
Do you think that fonts carry a vibration as well?
I think everything carries a vibration. So absolutely. And again, like when you think about the world that we live in and the consumption and the chaos of what we're hit with instantly, and now we're in this scrolling brain, this scrolling mindset, if you are not hyper consistent, people will not connect you with what you're trying to sell, ever. I mean, if there's nothing else that you leave with, the most important thing from a marketing perspective, whether you understand the intention behind it or not, is just to be consistent. Because any kind of shift of fonts or anything is just going to send people, they're just not connecting you with that message.
So let's talk about storytelling, because there's particular components that make a good story when producing a campaign or social media post or anything like that. What are those? Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, well, there's like the hero's journey. Every great story in history has primary elements. Who's the hero? Who's the villain? What's the big, the plot twist, and how is it resolved, right? And these are parts of stories that are just universal. They were part of us as humans when we would sit around a fire and listening to campfire stories, right? That still exists. That DNA is inside of us, that we still connect to that power of story. And I think a lot of times we miss that element of how a little something could actually move somebody if done with intention. So that the primary archetypes of the story, obviously, we're going to get into archetypes, but one of the things is understanding, like, who is the storyteller? Who are your characters? What is the setting? Can you create context around that setting? What's the problem? How does someone feel in this problem? And then how will they feel when the problem is solved, right? So, like, define the arc. And even if it's a postcard, right? Like, take a step back and, and say, okay, I'm selling a house. What's the story of this house? Or what's the story of this place? Or what's the story of the people who are going to be here next, right? And it's just about leveling it up so that you're connecting to the heart of something and not just sort of leaving it flat on the surface where it's going to get lost amongst everything else.
So you're trying to carry that reader through the emotion, right? You're trying to bring them up and carry them so that there's that spark, and that's memorable, right? That's the important piece. You want that to be something they remember.
Well, and what you just said is exactly right. Guess what the root of loyalty is? Emotion. How do we get emotion? We get into someone's frontal lobe, right? We surprise them, we delight them. And if we can get into that part of our brains with each other, we actually have a lasting memory. And otherwise, it just doesn't connect, right? That's like, there's a little equation of, familiarity equals trust. Trust equals loyalty. Loyalty equals, so you just have to, like, remember, again, like, I understand the heart of an agent actually quite deeply, because I see you all as micro entrepreneurs. And as an entrepreneur myself, I understand that oftentimes you're juggling literally 40, 50 tasks that require 40, 50 different parts of your brain, right? So it's not like you're tactically doing something and then you're also supposed to be creative, and then you're trying to, like, be empathetic and listen and be a therapist, but then also be a negotiator, right? It's like a series of competing different parts of skills, right? And oftentimes agents are asked to do all of them well. But the point of it is try to compartmentalize so the juggling aspects end up leaving you not sort of shallow on the top. So when you're creating, get into your creator mode. When you're negotiating, get into your negotiator mode, even if it's just a snap with a breath. But that element of being able to focus that energy, your energies, into that, the archetypal energy will really aid you so that you're not just getting it done. And getting it done really is a waste of your energy. That's my soapbox.
So let's go back to nurture marketing, because that's the last component of an intentional marketing plan.
Experience and nurturing.
Yes. And one of your phrases that I love is surprise and delight, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed Say that again.
Oh, so experience marketing and nurture marketing is one of the last components of an intentional marketing plan. And one of Molly's sayings is that you always aim to surprise and delight. So you're tapping into that emotional aspect of the relationship. Because consistency is so important, what do you think an agent can do to kind of keep on top of that and not let it go to the wayside as they remember to negotiate contracts and everything else?
Yeah, so when I think of experience marketing, like the question is, what is the experience that my people are having with me at any given moment? What am I leaving them with, right? How are they feeling after they're interacting with me? And that goes with everything from if you're inviting them to an event, that's also nurture marketing. If you're sending an email, like what do you want the person on the receiving end to be feeling? What is the intention of the action, right? I think that also levels the bar in terms of should I send this or not, or again, just pushing things out because it's a checkbox. I need to do this, push it, right? And then not really thinking about the message behind it. So experience marketing is about surprising and delighting. And there is a lot of brain science around this that says if you surprise somebody, you are more likely to become memorable because it's unexpected. And for whatever reason, that moment that we create for people, whether it is a text saying, oh my gosh, I'm at the coffee shop and this person has the exact same color, think of you, and like, oh, they thought of me. Like those moments, it doesn't have to be expensive. It does need to be thoughtful and it needs to be true. So this is where like abdicating this responsibility to an outside marketing firm or to somebody, I do not recommend. Because you are the keepers of your intelligence and you are the keepers of those moments with your people. And your job is to try to stir up those moments. And you can do that by being very present. Like if you're in Durham and you had an interaction with someone and they said that they love daffodils and you walk by daffodils, take the picture, send the text, thinking of you, hope you're well, or whatever, right? It's easy stuff, but that surprises people. Now, when it comes to nurture marketing, it's very much hand in hand with experiences, right? But it's over time. And with the lead cycle with agents and having the move cycle being so long, like the 7 to 10 years, I think, or depending on the market, but I think for us, I think it's 7 years still. But that's all a very long time to stay in someone's awareness. I mean, and the truth of the matter is, most people do this very, very poorly because our lives shift. The people we're in flow with today aren't the same people we're in flow with 7 years from now. And guess what? There's no shame in that. There really is no shame. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, it's so disappointing when you drive by your old client's house and someone else's sign is in the neighborhood. Like that's the absolute embodiment of the worst of the worst, right? But the truth is it? Your life is in flow, their life is in flow, right? And I think it's a very, very huge ask. The way that you can do it, again, is creating experiences, being very intentional, making sure that you're continuing the relationship, and finding ways to stay in someone's life that's true and authentic. But if your life paths shift and you're no longer at preschool and your kids are in different stages, then the truth of the matter is it just weird, right? Like when is it weird and when is it authentic? And finding those moments of authenticity, I think, is it. And I don't think I've ever said that out loud before, but the truth of the matter is, if someone's just constantly reaching out, mm-hmm. and it's
without a real
thing,
mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel right. And I think it actually maybe does more damage for your personal brand, unless it's genuinely authentic and you have found a way to relate and stay connected personally.
Stay relatable.
But like that's where like a home bot or like, the CMA reports or staying on top of neighborhoods actually comes into play, because then you're actually always coming to someone with value, mm-hmm. and you're not just trying to be someone's bestie. And I think that role of wealth advisor that you have the potential to play, especially right now in our area as it grows and these different neighborhood areas are shifting so quickly, If I were trying to sell real estate, I would own my particular market. I would keep people up to date with stats. I would showcase what's happening in our homes, what's coming around in the development. I would be attending the city council meetings. I would be doing all of those things because that is actually valuable to your people, and that is communication that you can have to a group, right? You can do like, Carpenter Village and Cary, right? Here's what's happening in Carpenter Village. Here's what's happening in Cary. You can do those things, and you can do it to that swath of people in that zip code, and it's not weird. So again, just some things to think about are like what's weird and what's not.
For any ninjas in the room, there's a lot of overlap if you're catching on to that. So if you're looking for a system, I would definitely think about the Ninja installation in November. Just plugging that in. Rick told me to. So let's talk about the archetypes.
Okay. This is my favorite, actually.
What are archetypes? Let's start there.
Yeah, so archetypes are the collective unconscious, right? So Carl Jung is a very, very famous psychologist who studied these universal subconscious energies, right? And very, very well studied. My two favorite people, if you're interested in learning, are Carl Jung and a modern day woman. Her name is Caroline Myss. And she wrote a book called The Sacred Contracts. The way that this is relevant to you and to your business is Carl Jung identified 12 primary archetypes that everybody fits into sort of generally, right? And they're the hero, the magician, the warrior, the victim, the child, there's these energies that we all exhibit in different parts of our life, right? But guess what? Our clients also exhibit them in their lives. And so when you understand sort of the way that humans are generally wired, and that's really what this is, generally wired, then you'll be able to understand what moves them. What happens when they're motivated? What happens when they're afraid, right? What happens when they're this, and if you understand these general, like if you have a hero client, for example, and you're like, okay, this hero client, they want to hear this, and this is going to scare them. So I need to make sure that I am balancing aspirational language, but also they're afraid when they're not in control. So how do I help them feel in control throughout this transaction? This is EQ. This is your human intelligence that it's allowing you to connect deeply and to shift your way of being so it's aligned with the language they would understand. Caroline Myss takes it a step deeper and does it for ourselves. And she creates, she totally do this, and it's in the book Sacred Contracts. She has an archetype wheel of 12 of the archetypal behaviors. And she has 4 that she says everybody has. Every single human on the planet has 4 primary archetypes that represent in some capacity in their life. It's the victim, it's the prostitute, it's the saboteur, and it's I forget what the 4th is. But and it's like with the prostitute, for example, it's like what parts of your life do you sell out, right? Where do you sell out? Is in the child. What part of your life, like what area of your life does your inner wounded child show up, right? Is it in negotiations and you tend to have a fit, right? And you have a tantrum if you don't get your way, right? Like where do those aspects of each of our personalities show up in life? And these personalities aren't all bad. They have a when in light, it's your pro, and when dark, it's your con. But you need to really understand the workings of how you are wired so that when that behaves or that behavior arises, you're able to walk and be proactive or be aware, self-aware, and so you're not just responding. And again, this is one of the shifts of living a life of purpose versus floating around. But it is cool.
So when we think about showing up with value and with authenticity, right, when we go to reach out to our sphere, if we are aligning to that particular archetype, it's going to be a lot easier to be authentic. So I think one of a cool exercise is find what your archetype might be, like Molly was just saying, and it's no different than the notion of do more of what you're already doing, because at that point you're already permeated into that culture. You already know the language, you already know the ins and outs, so that can carry you a little bit further. So the goodness loops. Let's talk about the goodness loops.
Yeah, and the goodness loops, I think, is something that, let me tell you a story. This is how it came to be. So years ago, I had a business locally in Raleigh. It was right across the street from the Arboretum. We had cloth napkins for kids. It was called Happykins. And the intention of Happykins was my kids were in preschool, and they came to school with these party napkins, and I was always room mom, so I was always in there kind of watching the kids. And they would like, oh, Superman, or this or that. So there was a thing with the napkins, which was kind of funny. But every day there would be a wastebasket filled with these crumpled, and the kids didn't even use them. I mean, they didn't use them. So I was like, oh, we should have cloth napkins for kids. Anyways, Happykins was born. So we had our sew and cut facility across from the Arboretum, and they were sewn by Vietnamese Montagnard women who were learning a trade, cut and sew. So one day I was over there and was working, and I saw all of these strips, the selvage that was left over from the napkins, and they were just literally starting to pile up. On the other side of the room, I saw these really beautiful woven baskets and placemats and like fabric arty stuff that the women were doing for fun for themselves in the free time. So I had waste, selvage, they had a talent, and so the good news loop was take my fabric, don't buy fabric, take what we have, the scrap, and use it for something good. So they would take it and then they would sell it at the farmer's market. So the idea of a goodness loop is that every business has something, whether it's time, it's money, it's scrap fabric, whether it's muscle, whether it's wisdom. Every business has something that is being left on the table. And the idea of a goodness loop, where it really relates to doing good business or being an intentional business, is when your goodness loop aligns with the needs of your customers. So and that gives you opportunity to access new audiences. Like for example, like if you have office space and it sits empty on the weekend, I am pretty sure there are organizations in this area who are killing to have a meeting space. What happens? And you get new people in, you're meeting new connections, right? Something that is being like underserved could actually serve someone else. So the idea of a goodness loop is looking closely at your business. What do you have to offer? And where does that connect the intersection of the needs of your people? The other aspect of a goodness loop, which is really important, and this is probably less important for you, but maybe there's like a thread here, is a lot of businesses create something negative. There's a negative result. In my tea business, I have packaging, which means that we are killing trees. Let's just be honest. Our packages are cardboard, and our packages, even though they're recycled and we've done the best, there still is an impact with what we're putting out in the world. So one of the things that our goodness loop with our pack is that we give back a portion of our profits to plant trees. So when you're aware of what your business, the imbalances that your business may be creating for the world, the planet, or others, your goodness loop should directly address that need. Because the idea here, and this is a really important tenet of an intentional business, is balance. So when we have imbalances create disease, dis-ease. And so the really important thing is to look really, really tightly at your business, say, where am I creating disease, disharmony for others? And then how can I create a goodness loop to make sure that I have a beautiful flow of reciprocity energy and I'm not necessarily creating disease? Hopefully that makes some sense. So.
Yes. So it's also another way to connect with your customer. If you can kind of find that common cause and that you can come together and towards that benefit.
And hey, and I am not too don't be too. There is no shame in extension of voice, right? So for example, if the thing that you're driving all the time, right? So you're polluting or whatever, right? Who just says, who cares? Who knows what that is? But let's just say you're driving all the time and you're polluting, and you're also really, really passionate about, the emissions, and there's an emissions group locally that meets, and that you're able to talk about, hey, I'm donating a portion of my money because I care about this thing. That group has newsletters, that has websites, that has constituents, that has people who also care about the thing that you're doing, that you're committed to. And every single one of those things is a marketing opportunity. It's an extension of voice. And there's always that thing in real estate where there's riches in the niches. It's real, right? Because when you're passionate and purposely aligned, you're going to be passionately and purposely aligned with the people that you want to do business with. Yeah. And that is, I think, why real estate, I'm so incredibly passionate about your businesses, because you can actually do these things really easy. You're not moving a freighter. You are a small little nimble sailboat. So when your business gets to shift and you get to make these changes and your team starts to care, you actually can change the world. So it really is super powerful. Like, a lot of businesses, it's hard to move. You have no excuse. You move your mind, you move your business. And that is super, super powerful. I just want to make sure that you feel that, because it's not true. You have the power that a lot of businesses don't have. So I just want to kind of...
That's very true, yeah. We were inspired a little bit by Molly's Goodness Loops in collecting funds for the North Carolina Realtors Fund today. So that's awesome that we were all able to come together for that.
That's it, right?
I'm curious, in the room, does anyone have a meditation practice or a regular yoga practice? Okay, cool. Do you have any tips for anyone that wants to start up their practice or is even struggling kind of maintaining a regular practice?
Yeah. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that if I had a nickel every time someone came up to me and said, I can't meditate, I would be very, very wealthy. So I think our society creates an expectation that you're supposed to just sit and be still, and it's this magical thing. Well, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't really work like that. Like setting a table, there are steps that you would do to prepare the table to eat. And I think meditation should be reframed in that way. The reason why the word ritual is the root of spiritual is because it's about steps that you do every single time. You're preparing your body to be at rest, your mind to be still. And I think that is the first step, is just taking away the shame that I can't do this because I sit down and I am picking up my phone every 2 seconds, or I'm negotiating contracts, or I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do this. I've got to pick up the kids in 15 minutes. Oh my God, I didn't brush my hair. Like, that is the natural state for everyone. That is called chitta vritti nirodha, the monkey mind, right? That is the natural state. So the expectation is that that's it. So everybody should just, no shame. I can't meditate because I'm starting where everybody else starts, right? So the steps to actually truly start a meditation practice is to learn to focus the mind. Use your senses. Use the chaos to focus the mind. So we have the senses, right? 5 senses. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. So one of the ways to start a meditation practice is when you sit, just get really in your body. Focusing like, okay, feeling all the things I can feel. I'm feeling my sitting bones on the chair. I'm feeling my clothing on my skin. Maybe I'm feeling the wind in my hair. I'm feeling some heat. Maybe I'm feeling something in my belly. Just tune in there. Guess what you're doing? You're tuning in, you're dialing, you're using your senses to get focused. That's a first step. The second step is then to start to pull that into the brain, right? There's a space, a beautiful space right between the brows. And that is, and if you want to find the place, it's called the center of the center of the center. So you draw a line from the top of your crown to your root. Just imagine a vertical light beam going across. Then there's another vertical light beam that's right over your ears. So find that, and then find that intersection. And then one more from the third eye to the back of the eye, a line going there. So if you can visualize in your mind's eye that space where all three of those points intersect, that is your third eye. So even if the exercise is sitting and drawing those lines with your mind's eye and trying to find that center, guess what? You're starting to meditate, right? But once you are able to hold that space and find that place, some people think this is the pineal gland, which is interesting enough that it looks like an actual eye of Horus. I mean, this is where symbols start to come together and it's like, holy moly, who made this stuff up? But anyway, so if you find that place, you can start to hold that. I think a really beautiful exercise, and if you want a tool, is if you have a candle at your home, you can take a candle, put it at your eye level. You sit in a comfortable seat, and then you stare at the flame. Hold it there for like a minute or so. And then when you close your eyes, you'll notice that the inverse of that flame is actually in the space between your brows. It's in your mind's eye. So then the exercise is to try to hold that flame and focus on that flame for as long as you can. And the cool thing that happens is the flame sort of flickers, it might move around, but the work is to keep pulling it back into center. Pulling it back into center. And what are you doing? You're focusing. That's all that you're doing. You are learning to focus your brain on a single point. That ability to focus is a superpower because guess what? Your phones are teaching you how to not focus. Our brains are so scattered that even simple tasks are really hard to complete sometimes because we're constantly bombarded, that monkey mind. So the ability to focus your energy and to focus your mind on a task, I'm telling you, is absolutely a superpower. So if nothing else, and that's where your meditation practice stops, learning to do that will give you a massive competitive edge. And the quality of your work is going to improve no matter what. So those are like table stakes in my mind. And like with the kids these days, it's 10,000 times worse. I mean, we have a culture that's coming up that like literally cannot focus. So it's really important.
I love that exercise. I'm going to try that because I'm the classic overthinker, and I'm looking at Brian because we are both always overthinking things. So you and I are going to try that. And I want to drive the point home that it doesn't have to be for hours or even like minutes. Minutes is enough as a starting point.
Well, and even like coming back to your breath in the beginning, if you remember. So the way that you do that at work, if you're like in a situation where you're feeling yourself spinning, right? And if you knew your archetypes, you're like, oh no, here comes the Kraken or Mother Bear's on her way. Like, you know, like these are the things that my personal archetypes that you don't want to encounter. If I feel that coming out, I'm like, all right, you know, here comes the Kraken. I'll be like, all right, focus on the very tip of your nose. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. And you just reset back to neutral. Right? And that gives you, again, that power to be able to manage any circumstance with intention. So again, you're not reacting, but you're present in your situation. And that, again, is another superpower. After you learn to focus, the last step in a meditation practice is learning to quiet. And a beautiful exercise and a beautiful story that I want to leave you with is the idea that when you're sitting and you're still and maybe you've breathed, you know, you were practicing some breathing and you were like, okay, I'm gonna just really try to quiet my mind and use my senses, and I'm in my body and I'm still, the mind still travels. And so the exercise then in meditation is to be the observer of the mind. So as a thought comes in, the thought comes in. So instead of it's like, oh, I forgot what's for dinner tonight. So instead of shopping and then planning your whole meal, you can say stop it and you just allow that what's for dinner, and then you release. Just literally drop it in the river. The river, like I actually visualize a river. Drop that thought into the river, let it go. Sitting there again, dogs barking. Drop that in the river and release. And then you just keep dropping the thoughts, but you're watching what's coming into your mind. And as it relates to self-reflection, as you do this process, that also is what you journal about. So as you're sitting here and noticing the thoughts that are coming into your mind, just journal them afterwards, and you'll start to see patterns in your life, like, oh man, I am a negative Nelly, right? Or holy moly, like I am like way too obsessed with my tasks. This is what's killing my mojo right now, is I'm obsessed with tasks, you know? But you'll start to identify the trends, and your life is based on what's trending in your mind. So if you understand what's trending in your mind, you will be understand the circumstances that are materialized in front of you. So hopefully that helps.
And the trend is changeable, right? Like it doesn't seem like it can be, but it really is. So that's really important. So one last thing, and then we'll do Q&A. But let's talk about self-care.
Yes.
And why is it important to take that time? What does it do to us and to our business?
Yeah, my friend Stephanie Lemire, she's in Wilmington. She's also an agent broker. She said, and she has a son with severe developmental disability. So her life is a hard life. I mean, physically and mentally, it's exhausting. And she said, you know, self-care isn't selfish. For me, it's strategic. Because if I am not able to fill my cup, I can't show up for anybody else. And I think that's the root motivation of why you can give yourself permission to care and love for yourself, and it's not selfish. So for me, I am a water person, so my self-care is actually a bubble bath. And I know sometimes you'll see a meme that says, self-care isn't a bubble bath. Actually, for me it is. That is how I like refuel and replenish. So I think the key is what refuels, replenishes you, right? Understanding that first, and not just doing something, but doing the thing that actually refuels you. So with self-care, again, the other thing is understanding like what it is that moves you, giving yourself permission, it's not strategic, and then honoring the cycle of rest. And what do I mean by honoring the cycle of rest? If you were to pause and observe in nature, nothing has continual growth. Nothing. Maybe my backyard, which is a farm and it's all weeds, but you know what? That's not a great thing. Everything in nature has a cycle. And what happens in the fall when the leaves drop on the ground, they actually nourish the soil for new growth in the spring. And so when we understand the cycle and the nature of things, we also understand that we too are part of that cycle. Our systems of rest and work and play are all part of our human cycle. And if we are imbalanced and aren't honoring those parts of our life, we are out of balance, right? And what is part of being intentional is about finding that balance. And so it's really important to make sure that you're honoring the cycles and the seasons of your own life. And you may have seasons of growth, of spring, right? Where last year, you know, you were planting your seeds, and then this year you're harvesting those seeds, or maybe everything is barren, right? So what do? You work the soil again, right? You work the soil of yourself. But there's a lot of very beautiful metaphoric symbols within nature as a system that when applied to ourselves and our businesses is very, very, very potent. So, that was very potent. So,
one of the things I think you'll find when you start to be a little bit more intentional just in life in general is the awareness that there's things that replenish your energy and there's things that deplete your energy. So when we make conscious choices to go towards those things that replenish our energy, that's when we warp time. The 4 hours now becomes 2 because we're much more effective. We're enjoying it a lot more. So if anybody's struggling with finding that balance and finding that time management, it's a good place to look. It's a good place to look.
Yeah, that's called the flow, when you have those moments where the time-space continuum folds. You know, you're like, oh my God, it's 8 hours. How the heck, you know, and it's like, you just were so in the moment, right? And like that is, like those are those experiences and those moments where like I want more of this. This is why, you know, I was born or whatever. But like, I do feel like we can't always live in those moments. And so the self-reflection are those moments, and the self-care are those moments when we are creating to make sure that we replenish so that we have the energy, just like a wave, right? Like, you know how much energy for a wave you have it pulls back a softness to break. Like every single metaphor in nature is always rest, work, and we are no different, right? So even though culturally we're programmed to never stop and to hustle, 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 it's actually maybe the one most toxic element of our entire culture. You have to rest. So
I love that. So we are out of time. We're going to open it for Q&A. If anybody has any questions for Molly, any other things you want to?
I just would like to let corporate know that I think we need a CBA yoga class.
Oh, I love that.
I think the way
That may be closer than you think.
You have to give SAS some kind of special credit. That's right. Years ago, they started doing all that.
Well, and I honestly think it's a massive competitive advantage. Here's why. Here's what you should put in the proposal for whomever makes those decisions, right? When you harmonize as a unit and you breathe together, you are collectively becoming a unit. You're becoming one. There is something very energetic that happens, and it's really, really powerful for teams to breathe together, right? And again, I think it comes back to wave theory and resonance and how things like, you know, if you know anything about wave theory, there's really something that happens scientifically that's powerful. The second thing is, and I really strongly believe this, is the ability to focus through a meditation practice is absolutely the thing that will help breathe life into everything else that you're doing. And most people really, really are, if we're talking about the zombie apocalypse, I think we already are there. Most people are really just reacting to everything in front of them, and there is no thought. You know, and I think that ability to say, okay, I'm just going to take a moment, I'm going to really get centered about what I'm doing. I'm going to ask myself, you know, my heart, like, why am I doing this? And how does this, you know, how does this show up in the world? And is this really how I want to show up in the world? Is this really what I want to give to this person? And then just take those extra moments before the action. You're going to make an impact. You know, and you are all, the impact pockets of each of you is potentially so beautiful, you know, and you are in the business of sacredness, homes. I mean, that is a beautiful job, a beautiful role that you have, is that you get to be the absolute heartbeat of someone else's life. Everything beautiful happens at home. It's where we raise our kids, it's where we feed, it's where we gather around the table. It is sacred work. You know, and so it's, again, when you're feeling that burnout, it's like that's an honor for you to be able to find that for somebody else. And so showing up in a way that allows you to remember that this isn't the commission, it's the process of getting someone to their next phase in their life is really beautiful. So
Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you for being here with us. Do we like this topic? Do we want to keep going down this rabbit hole of mindfulness and mindset and centering and being authentic? Yes. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here.
thank you.